Admiral Zexthera of the Galactic Coalition had seen many things in her 4 centuries of service. She had witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations, negotiated peace treaties between species that had warred for millennia, and commanded fleets that could glass entire worlds. But nothing had prepared her for what appeared on her sensors that day. The bridge of her flagship, the Divine Retribution, fell silent as the tactical officer's report echoed through the command center. A massive unknown vessel had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, completely bypassing all early warning sensors and detection grids that had been considered impenetrable for the past 2,000 years. Admiral, her tactical officer, a nervous Fraxian with trembling tentacles, called out. "The unknown vessel, it's not responding to any of our standard communication protocols. And, ma'am, its energy signature is unlike anything in our databases." Zexthera's 4 eyes narrowed as she studied the holographic display. The ship was enormous, easily dwarfing her own Dreadnought-class vessel. Its design was alien in a way that made her skin crawl. Where coalition ships were elegant curves and flowing lines that spoke of millennia of refined engineering, this vessel was angular, brutal, and somehow primitive yet advanced at the same time. The ship's hull appeared to be a dark metallic gray, scarred and weathered as if it had seen countless battles. Strange protrusions and weapon emplacements dotted its surface in patterns that defied conventional strategic thinking. Most unsettling of all, the vessel seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating an ominous shadow against the stars. "Have our xenoarchaeologists identified the species?" Zexthera asked, her voice steady despite the growing unease in her hearts. "Negative, Admiral. The ship's configuration doesn't match any known civilization in our records. The technology appears to be a hybrid of multiple development paths that should be impossible to integrate. Our analysts are calling it a technological anomaly." The Coalition had catalogued over 12,000 spacefaring species in the known galaxy. Each had their distinctive technological signatures, their preferred materials, their unique approach to faster-than-light travel. This ship showed traces of technologies that had never been seen working together, as if someone had taken the most effective elements from dozens of different civilizations and somehow made them function as a unified whole. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission," the communications officer announced, her voice pitched higher than usual. It's in over 400 different languages simultaneously, including several dead languages we haven't heard in millennia." "Put it through." The main viewscreen flickered to life, and Zexthera found herself staring at a being that made her step backward involuntarily. The creature was bipedal, roughly her own height, but where her species had evolved elegant features refined over millions of years, this being looked like it had been forged in the fires of a dying world. Its skin was a pale pinkish tone, marked with scars that spoke of violence and survival. Its eyes were small and forward-facing, the mark of a predator species, and they held an intelligence that was both familiar and utterly alien. Most disturbing of all, the being was smiling, showing teeth that were clearly designed for tearing flesh. "Greetings," the being said, and its voice carried through the translation matrix in perfect galactic standard, though the underlying tones suggested a vocal apparatus designed for intimidation. "I am Captain Sarachin of the human vessel UES Indomitable. We come seeking diplomatic contact with your coalition." The word human meant nothing to anyone on the bridge, but the casual confidence in the creature's voice sent ripples of unease through the assembled officers. This was clearly a predator species, and it had just announced itself with the kind of casual authority typically reserved for apex civilizations. "Unknown vessel," Zexthera replied, drawing herself up to her full height. "You have entered Coalition space without authorization and bypassed our security perimeter. By what right do you demand audience?" The human smile widened, and Zexthera noticed that several of her bridge crew had unconsciously moved their hands toward their sidearms. There was something about that expression that triggered deep, primal fear responses. "By the right of first contact protocol, Admiral. We represent the United Earth System, a civilization that has recently achieved interstellar capability. We seek peaceful relations and formal recognition within the galactic community." The science officer's workstation began chiming frantically. "Admiral, I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout their ship. Whatever their power source is, it's generating more raw energy than our entire battle group combined. And, ma'am, there's something else. I'm detecting what appears to be a crew complement of over 50,000 beings aboard that vessel." 50,000. Zexthera's mind reeled. The largest coalition dreadnoughts carried crews of perhaps 3,000. The logistics of maintaining that many beings on a single vessel were staggering, and suggested a level of industrial capability that was deeply concerning. "Admiral," the human continued, apparently unaware of the panic beginning to spread through her bridge crew, "we understand this may come as a surprise. We've been observing galactic communications for some time now, learning your languages and customs. We felt it was appropriate to make formal contact rather than continuing to watch from the shadows." "Watching from the shadows?" Zexthara's voice carried a dangerous edge. "How long have you been in our space without authorization?" "Oh, we haven't been in your space, Admiral. We've been in our own space, watching your activities in neighboring systems. The galaxy is larger than your current borders suggest." The tactical display updated suddenly, and Zexthara felt her blood turn to ice. The computer had been analyzing the human ship's trajectory, backtracking its course through hyperspace. The projection showed a point of origin that was impossibly far away, in a region of space that Coalition surveys had marked as empty and uninhabitable. "That's impossible," her science officer whispered. "That region is a stellar graveyard. Nothing could survive there, let alone develop spaceflight." Captain Chen's expression grew more serious. "Admiral, we would very much like to begin formal diplomatic relations. However, I should inform you that we are not alone. The Indomitable is the first of our vessels to make contact, but we are part of a larger fleet conducting exploration and diplomatic missions throughout this region of space." "How many ships?" Zexthara demanded. "Currently? We have approximately 200 vessels conducting various operations in your local galactic neighborhood. Most are smaller than the Indomitable, though a few are larger." 200 ships. Each potentially carrying tens of thousands of beings. Zexthara realized she was looking at a military force that could potentially challenge the entire Coalition fleet, and these humans had announced their presence with casual confidence that suggested they weren't particularly concerned about the Coalition's response. "We would like to request a formal audience with your leadership," Chen continued. "We have much to offer in terms of trade, technology, and mutual defense agreements. The galaxy, as we've observed, faces many threats. We believe our species could be valuable allies." "What threats?" Zexthara asked, though part of her dreaded the answer. The human's expression grew grim. "Admiral, in your records, you have 17 separate incidents over the past century involving what you term dark fleet incursions. Ships that appear from empty space, attack civilian targets, and vanish without trace. You've never been able to track them or identify their origin." Zexthara's mandibles clicked involuntarily. The dark fleet incidents were classified at the highest levels. The fact that these humans knew about them suggested surveillance capabilities that were deeply troubling. "We know where they come from," Shen said quietly. "And we know why they've been testing your defenses. The attacks on your colonies haven't been random raids, Admiral. They've been reconnaissance missions. Someone is mapping your capabilities, learning your weaknesses. And you know this how? Because we've been fighting them for the past 40 years. The bridge fell completely silent. The Dark Fleet had been the Coalition's greatest mystery and their deepest fear. Unknown attackers with technology that seemed to defy known physics, striking without warning and leaving no traces. The fact that these humans claimed not only knowledge of them but actual combat experience suggested capabilities that redefined everything the Coalition thought they knew about the galactic balance of power. "Admiral," her communications officer called out, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm detecting multiple hyperspace signatures. More ships are arriving." The tactical display lit up with new contacts as 3 more vessels dropped out of hyperspace around the human ship. Each was different in design but shared the same dark, predatory aesthetic. The new ships took up protective positions around the Indomitable with a precision that spoke of long practice and coordinated command. "My apologies for the additional ships," Chen said smoothly. "Standard first contact protocol requires appropriate security measures. I hope you understand." Zexthara understood perfectly. She was looking at a species that had developed first contact procedures that assumed potential hostility and prepared for it accordingly. Everything about these humans suggested a civilization that had learned to survive in an environment far more dangerous than anything the Coalition had ever faced. "What do you want from us?" Zexthara asked. "Mutual cooperation, Admiral. We're willing to share our knowledge of the Dark Fleet and our defensive technologies. In return, we would like formal recognition as a sovereign species and access to coalition trade networks. We have resources and technologies that could benefit everyone. And if we refuse? The human smile returned, and this time there was no warmth in it whatsoever. Admiral, we didn't come here to make threats. But we also didn't come here to ask permission to exist in the galaxy. We're offering partnership because we believe it's mutually beneficial. The Dark Fleet is preparing for something major, and, when they move, every civilization in this region will need every advantage they can get. Zexthera studied the tactical display, counting the energy signatures of the human vessels. Each ship was radiating power levels that suggested weapon systems far beyond coalition standards. She was looking at a first contact scenario that had the potential to reshape the entire galactic balance of power. We will need to consult with coalition leadership, she said finally. Of course. We'll maintain position here while you deliberate. But, Admiral, I should mention that we're operating under time constraints. Our intelligence suggests the Dark Fleet will make their next major move within the next 6 local months. Whatever decision your leadership makes, it will need to be made quickly. The transmission ended, leaving Zexthera staring at the display showing 4 human warships holding position at the edge of her detection range. Ships that had appeared without warning, carrying crews larger than entire coalition fleets, commanded by a species that claimed combat experience against enemies the coalition couldn't even identify. She had come to this system to conduct routine patrol operations. Instead, she had stumbled into a first contact situation that would determine whether the coalition faced the future as partners with a potentially powerful ally, or as rivals to a species that might already outclass them in every meaningful way. As her communications officer began preparing secure channels to Coalition High Command, Zexthera couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy had just become a far more dangerous and complicated place. The Coalition Council chambers on Zendara Prime had not seen such an emergency session in over 3 centuries. Representatives from 47 member species had gathered in record time, their varied forms filling the massive amphitheater that served as the heart of galactic governance. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension as species that had spent millennia learning to coexist found themselves facing the unknown together. Chancellor Morbeck, an ancient Etherian whose translucent form had presided over the council for nearly 2 centuries, floated at the center of the assembly. His mental voice resonated through the translation matrix with the weight of absolute authority. The matter before us today transcends normal diplomatic protocol, Morbeck began, his consciousness touching each representative simultaneously. We face a first contact scenario unlike any in recorded history. Admiral Zexthera, present your report. The holographic projection of Admiral Zexthera materialized above the council floor, still transmitting from the edge of coalition space where the human fleet waited. Her image flickered with the strain of maintaining real-time communication across such vast distances. Honored Chancellor, esteemed representatives, she began, her voice carrying across the chamber with perfect clarity. The beings calling themselves humans have presented us with capabilities that challenge our fundamental understanding of technological development and military doctrine. The display above her head came alive with tactical readouts, energy signatures, and detailed scans of the human vessels. Gasps and chittering sounds of distress echoed from various species as the data became clear. These ships appear to use hybrid technologies that our best scientists insist should be incompatible, Zexthera continued. They've achieved power generation levels that exceed our theoretical maximums, maintain crew complements that suggest logistical capabilities beyond our current understanding, and demonstrate stealth technologies that render our early warning systems obsolete. Representative Clickstar of the Hive Minds leaned forward, her compound eyes reflecting the light in agitation. Admiral, you mentioned they claim knowledge of the Dark Fleet incidents. What specific information have they provided? They haven't provided details yet, Representative. However, they demonstrated knowledge of classified incident reports that only the highest levels of coalition intelligence have access to. They claim 40 years of active combat experience against these same forces. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. The Dark Fleet incidents had been carefully classified to prevent widespread panic. The fact that an unknown species possessed detailed intelligence about them suggested either security breaches at the highest levels or surveillance capabilities that were deeply troubling. Dr. Varen Goldscale, the Coalition's chief xenobiologist, activated his speaking privilege. Chancellor, I've reviewed all available data on these humans. Their physiological profile is consistent with what we classify as an apex predator species. Forward-facing eyes, prominent canine teeth, evidence of recent evolutionary violence. Every indicator suggests a species that achieves dominance through aggression and competition. And, yet, interrupted Ambassador Thelnara of the Peaceful Union, they approached with diplomatic overtures rather than immediate hostility. This suggests cultural evolution beyond their biological imperatives. Or, Dr. Goldscale replied grimly, it suggests a predator species intelligent enough to approach prey with apparent peaceful intentions. Chancellor Morveck's consciousness pressed for attention. Dr. Goldscale, what is your assessment of their technological capabilities? Unprecedented, Chancellor. The energy signatures alone suggest they've solved fundamental engineering problems that have stumped our best minds for millennia. The integration of multiple technological paradigms should be impossible, yet their ships function with apparent stability. Most concerning is their apparent crew size. Maintaining 50,000 beings on a single vessel requires resource management and life support systems that exceed our current capabilities. General Korath, the coalition's senior military strategist, stood from his position among the warrior species representatives. His massive frame and scarred carapace marked him as a veteran of countless conflicts. Chancellor, the tactical implications are clear, he rumbled, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never lost a battle. If their claims about fleet size are accurate, we're looking at a military force that could challenge our combined fleets. The question isn't whether we can defeat them in open conflict. The question is whether we can afford to try. You're suggesting capitulation, demanded Representative Zorth of the Militant Alliance, her voice sharp with indignation. I'm suggesting realism, Korath replied. Their approach demonstrates confidence that suggests they don't view us as a serious threat. That level of confidence is either based on superior capabilities or catastrophic overconfidence. Given the evidence, I believe the former is more likely. Ambassador Thelnara activated her speaking privilege again. General Korath raises an important point, but we're overlooking the potential benefits of cooperation. If these humans genuinely possess knowledge about the Dark Fleet threat, rejecting their alliance could leave us vulnerable to enemies we cannot defeat alone. Assuming their intentions are genuine, Dr. Goldscale interjected. A predator species offering protection from other predators could simply be positioning themselves as the dominant threat. The debate continued for several hours as representatives voiced concerns, fears, and potential strategies. Some argued for immediate military mobilization, others for careful diplomatic engagement, and still others for attempting to delay any decision until more information could be gathered. Finally, Chancellor Morveck called for silence. His consciousness touched each representative, gathering their thoughts and concerns into a unified understanding of the Council's position. Admiral Zexthera, he said, his mental voice carrying absolute authority, what is your personal assessment of the human commander you spoke with? Zexthera was quiet for a moment before responding. Chancellor, in 4 centuries of service, I've learned to read the intentions of dozens of species. Captain Chen displayed confidence without arrogance, strength without immediate aggression, and knowledge that suggests capabilities far beyond what she revealed. Most importantly, she spoke of the Dark Fleet threat with the tone of someone who has faced genuine danger and survived. I believe she was being truthful about their combat experience. And their offer of alliance? I believe it was genuine, Chancellor. But I also believe it came from a position of strength, not desperation. They're offering cooperation because they believe it's mutually beneficial, not because they need our help. General Korath stepped forward. Chancellor, I request permission to accompany Admiral Zexthera for direct assessment of human military capabilities. If we're going to make an alliance with a potentially hostile species, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. And I request permission to lead a diplomatic envoy, added Ambassador Thelnara. First contact protocols exist for a reason. We need to understand their culture, their motivations, and their true intentions before making any commitments. Dr. Goldscale raised his speaking staff. I request inclusion in any diplomatic mission. Understanding their biology and technological integration is crucial for assessing both their capabilities and potential vulnerabilities. Chancellor Morveck's consciousness expanded, touching each council member simultaneously. In the mental space that existed beyond physical reality, he conducted a rapid poll of opinions and concerns from every representative present. The council has reached a preliminary decision, he announced. We will dispatch a formal diplomatic mission to establish direct contact with the human leadership. This mission will include military assessment teams, cultural anthropologists, and scientific observers. Ambassador Thelnara will lead the diplomatic contingent, General Korath will conduct military liaison duties, and Dr. Goldscale will head the scientific assessment team. However, he continued, and his mental voice carried a note of stern warning, this mission will operate under strict security protocols. Our fleet will maintain ready status, and we will prepare contingency plans for various scenarios, including the possibility that these humans represent a new threat rather than potential allies. Admiral Zexthara's image nodded in acknowledgement. Understood, Chancellor. What should I tell Captain Chen? Tell her that the coalition accepts her request for formal diplomatic contact. A full ambassadorial mission will arrive within 10 standard days. Until then, both fleets will maintain current positions and avoid any actions that could be interpreted as hostile. And if they refuse to wait? Zexthara asked. General Karatha's mandibles clicked in what might have been anticipation. Then, we'll have our answer about their true intentions. The session concluded with representatives dispersing to their various duties, but the air remained thick with tension. Everyone present understood that the next few days would determine whether the coalition gained powerful allies or faced a threat unlike any in their history. As the chamber emptied, Chancellor Morbeck remained floating in the center of the space, his consciousness reaching out to touch the quantum communication networks that connected coalition space. In the vast web of information that flowed between star systems, he could sense the subtle changes already beginning to occur. Emergency military exercises were being scheduled across a dozen systems. Trade routes were being quietly adjusted to avoid potential conflict zones. Research teams were diving into archives searching for any historical parallels to their current situation. The entire coalition was beginning to mobilize for an uncertain future. But what troubled Morbeck most was the humans' casual mention of a 200-ship fleet conducting operations throughout coalition space. If such a force had been operating undetected, it suggested surveillance and infiltration capabilities that rendered their traditional security measures obsolete. The humans had announced themselves with confidence, offered alliance from a position of strength, and demonstrated technological capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about galactic civilization. Whether they would prove to be saviors or conquerors remained to be seen. As Morbeck's consciousness withdrew from the chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy had just entered a new and dangerous age, one where the carefully maintained balance of power that had preserved peace for millennia was about to be tested in ways none of them were prepared for. The countdown to the diplomatic mission had begun, and, with it, the countdown to a future that would reshape everything the coalition thought they knew about their place in the universe. The coalition diplomatic vessel Harmony's light dropped out of hyperspace exactly 10 standard days after the council session, its sleek hull gleaming against the backdrop of stars. Ambassador Thelnara stood on the bridge, her elegant form tense with anticipation as she studied the tactical display showing the human fleet. What she saw defied every expectation she had formed during the journey. The humans had not simply maintained their position as promised. They had constructed what could only be described as a temporary space station in the 10 days since first contact. Massive modular components connected the 4 original ships in a complex web of docking tubes and expanded habitation modules. The construction showed an understanding of rapid deployment engineering that challenged coalition assumptions about logistical capabilities. Ambassador, Captain Velox of the Harmony's Light called from his command station, the humans are requesting permission to send a shuttle to escort us to their primary vessel. They're offering to provide their own atmospheric requirements for the meeting. General Korath stepped forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the bridge. A thoughtful gesture, or an attempt to control the environment of negotiations? In my experience, Ambassador Thelnara replied, it's usually both. Accept their offer, Captain. But maintain full defensive readiness. The human shuttle that approached was unlike any spacecraft in coalition records. Where their own shuttles were designed for elegance and efficiency, this vessel looked like it had been built to survive combat operations. Its hull was scarred and patched, suggesting actual battle damage, and its weapon systems were clearly visible and functional. Dr. Goldscale, studying the readings from his portable sensors, looked up with concern. The shuttle's hull composition includes materials I don't recognize. The metallurgy suggests manufacturing processes that shouldn't be possible with conventional fusion-based industry. What are you suggesting? Thelnara asked. I'm suggesting they've solved fundamental engineering problems we haven't even identified yet. The docking procedure proceeded smoothly, and, moments later, the airlock opened to reveal 2 human beings. The first was Captain Chen, whom they recognized from the initial contact recordings. The second was a larger male whose bearing suggested military training and whose scars indicated extensive combat experience. Ambassador Thelnara, Chen said, her translation matrix rendering her words in perfect galactic standard. Welcome aboard. I'm Captain Sarah Chen, and this is Colonel Marcus Webb, our military liaison. We're honored by your presence. Thelnara studied both humans carefully. Their casual confidence remained evident, but she could see subtle signs of tension in their postures. These were beings accustomed to potential danger, even in diplomatic situations. Captain Chen, Colonel Webb, she replied formally, we come in the spirit of peaceful contact and mutual understanding. We hope to establish a foundation for future cooperation between our peoples. That's exactly what we're hoping for as well, Chen replied. If you'll follow us, Admiral Harrison is waiting to meet with you aboard the Indomitable. The journey through the human vessel provided the coalition delegation with their first close look at human technology and culture. The corridors were wider than necessary for human physiology, suggesting design considerations for other species. The walls displayed artwork that ranged from realistic depictions of Earth landscapes to abstract representations of space exploration. But what struck Dr. Goldscale most forcefully was the evidence of battle damage that had been repaired rather than replaced. Entire sections of corridor showed different metallurgy where hull breaches had been patched. Blast scoring marked bulkheads that had been reinforced rather than rebuilt. This was a ship that had seen extensive combat and survived. Captain Chen, he said as they walked, your vessel shows significant battle damage. How long have you been in active combat operations? Chen's expression grew serious. The Indomitable has been in service for 15 years, Doctor. She's seen action against the Dark Fleet in 43 separate engagements. Every scar represents a lesson learned and crewmates lost. General Koroth stopped walking. 43 engagements? And you survived all of them? Colonel Webb's smile was grim. Survival isn't guaranteed in our line of work, General. But learning from every encounter is what keeps us alive long enough to protect others. They entered a large chamber that served as both meeting room and tactical center. Holographic displays showed star maps covering regions of space that extended far beyond coalition borders. The level of detail suggested comprehensive surveying operations spanning decades. Admiral Harrison stood with his back to them, studying a display that showed fleet movements in real time. When he turned, the coalition delegation found themselves facing a human who radiated authority and competence in equal measure. His gray hair and lined face spoke of age and experience, while his upright bearing suggested someone accustomed to making life and death decisions. Ambassador Thelnara, General Koroth, Dr. Goldscale, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute command, welcome aboard the Indomitable. I'm Admiral James Harrison, commanding the 3rd Exploration Fleet of the United Earth System. 3rd Fleet? General Koroth asked. How many fleets do you maintain? Currently? 12 active exploration fleets, each consisting of between 100 and 300 vessels. Additionally, we maintain 6 defense fleets protecting our core systems and, for rapid response fleets for emergency situations. The numbers were staggering. The coalition's entire military consisted of perhaps 2,000 major vessels spread across dozens of systems. The humans were casually discussing fleet deployments that dwarfed their total military capability. Admiral, Thelnara said carefully, such force deployments suggest military capabilities that far exceed what most species require for exploration and defense. Are you facing threats that require such extensive preparation? Harrison gestured to the holographic displays surrounding them. Ambassador, let me show you what we've learned about the Dark Fleet over the past 40 years. The displays came alive with tactical recordings, sensor data, and reconstructed battle sequences. The coalition delegation watched in growing horror as the scope of the Dark Fleet threat became clear. These attacks on coalition worlds represent less than 5% of Dark Fleet activity, Harrison explained. They've been conducting systematic surveys of inhabited systems throughout this entire galactic arm. Your encounters with them have been probing operations, testing your response times and defensive capabilities. But why? Dr. Goldscale asked. What could they possibly gain from such extensive intelligence gathering? Harrison's expression grew grim. They're preparing for invasion, Doctor. Full-scale conquest of every inhabited system in this region of space. Our intelligence estimates they'll begin major operations within 6 local months. General Korath stepped closer to the displays, studying the tactical data. These force estimates, if they're accurate, they represent a military capability that could overwhelm the coalition's combined fleets. That's correct, General. Which is why we're offering alliance. Separately, neither our forces nor yours can stop what's coming. Together, we might have a chance. Ambassador Thelnara felt a chill run through her system. Admiral, what exactly are you proposing? Complete military and technological cooperation, Harrison replied without hesitation. Shared intelligence, coordinated fleet operations, technology transfer programs, and unified command structure for the duration of the crisis. Unified command structure? Koratha's voice carried a dangerous edge. Under whose authority? Whoever can best coordinate our combined forces, Harrison said calmly. We're not interested in political dominance, General. We're interested in survival. Dr. Goldscale activated his recording systems. Admiral, your technological capabilities suggest advancement far beyond what we thought possible for a species of your apparent age. How did humanity achieve such rapid development? Harrison was quiet for a moment before responding. Doctor, humanity didn't develop in isolation. We've been part of the galactic community for longer than you realize. We've simply been observers until now. Observers? Thelnara's voice carried a note of suspicion. For how long? Our first contact with galactic civilization occurred approximately 2 centuries ago, Harrison admitted. We've been learning, adapting, and preparing ever since. The revelation hit the coalition delegation like a physical blow. 2 centuries of observation meant the humans had been watching the rise of the coalition, studying their technologies, learning their weaknesses, and preparing for this moment for longer than most coalition species had been spacefaring. You've been spying on us for 200 years? General Koratha's voice carried barely controlled anger. We've been protecting you for 200 years, Colonel Webb corrected. Every Dark Fleet probe that was mysteriously driven off, every deep space anomaly that vanished without explanation, every sensor ghost that your ships reported but couldn't track. That was us, keeping them from learning too much about your capabilities. Admiral Harrison gestured to another display showing incident reports spanning decades. We've been fighting a shadow war to keep the Dark Fleet from gathering enough intelligence to launch their invasion. But they're finally ready to move, and we can't hold them back alone anymore. Ambassador Thelnara studied the tactical data with growing comprehension. The humans hadn't revealed themselves out of desire for alliance. They had revealed themselves because they were losing a war that the coalition didn't even know was being fought. What do you need from us? She asked quietly. Industrial capacity, Harrison replied immediately. We have superior technology and tactics, but the Dark Fleet outnumbers us by approximately 50 to 1. We need your shipyards, your resource extraction capabilities, and your manufacturing infrastructure to build enough ships to fight them effectively. And, in return? Complete technology transfer. Every advancement we've made, every weapon system we've developed, every defensive innovation we've discovered. We'll make your forces capable of fighting on equal terms with an enemy that could otherwise eliminate your entire civilization. The chamber fell silent as the coalition delegation absorbed the implications. They were being offered technological advancement beyond their dreams in exchange for committing their entire civilization to a war they didn't understand against an enemy they couldn't defeat alone. Admiral, General Korath said finally, assuming we accept this alliance, what assurance do we have that humanity won't simply replace the Dark Fleet as a conquering force? Harrison's smile was tired but genuine. General, if we wanted to conquer the coalition, we would have done it 2 centuries ago when you were still developing interstellar flight. We've had the capability to eliminate or dominate every coalition species since before your current government existed. The fact that we didn't should tell you something about our intentions. Dr. Goldscale looked up from his analysis of the tactical data. The technological integration you're proposing, the timeline for training coalition forces in these new systems, it's extremely optimistic. Doctor, we've been preparing for this moment for decades. We have training programs ready, technical manuals translated into over 400 languages, and instructor teams prepared to deploy immediately. The question isn't whether we can integrate our forces quickly enough. The question is whether the coalition is willing to commit to total war against an enemy that will show no mercy if they succeed. Ambassador Thelnara realized she was no longer conducting a standard first contact mission. She was negotiating the terms of her civilization's survival with allies who had been protecting them in secret for centuries. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders as she prepared to make recommendations that would reshape the galaxy forever. 3 months after the first human contact, the Kepler 442 system had transformed into the largest military construction zone in recorded galactic history. Coalition shipyards that had operated for centuries were being retrofitted with human technology, while massive cargo vessels ferried raw materials from mining operations that now operated around the clock on 17 different worlds. Admiral Zexthera stood in the command center of the newly constructed Joint Operations Facility, watching displays that showed fleet movements across 50 star systems. The scope of the mobilization effort defied comprehension. Every coalition member species had committed their entire industrial capacity to the war effort, while human technical teams worked frantically to upgrade defensive capabilities that might mean the difference between survival and extinction. Admiral, her new human liaison officer, Commander Patricia Torres, called from her workstation. "We're receiving confirmation from the Vorthan shipyards. The first squadron of upgraded coalition dreadnoughts will be ready for trials within the week." Zexthera studied the specifications of the upgraded vessels with something approaching disbelief. The human modifications had increased power generation by 300%, improved shield strength by a factor of 5, and integrated weapon systems that could engage targets at ranges previously thought impossible. More importantly, they had solved the fundamental tactical problems that had made coalition ships vulnerable to dark fleet attacks. "How many squadrons will be ready when they move?" she asked. "Current estimates suggest we'll have 47 upgraded dreadnoughts, 123 modernized cruisers, and over 400 refitted escort vessels," Torres replied. Additionally, the human fleets will contribute 215 vessels, including 12 ships of their largest classification. The integration process had not been without challenges. Coalition engineers struggled to understand human technology that seemed to violate fundamental physical laws, while human instructors worked to overcome cultural barriers that had never been encountered in their previous military cooperation programs. Some species adapted quickly to human tactical doctrine, while others found the aggressive, high-risk strategies almost impossible to implement. "Commander Torres," Zexthera said, "what's the status of the mixed crew programs?" "Better than expected in some areas, concerning in others," Torres replied honestly. "The Vraxian tactical officers have adapted to human fire control systems remarkably well. Their natural multitasking abilities actually make them superior gunners once they overcome their initial reluctance to engage in aggressive tactics. The hive mind species are proving invaluable for coordinating defensive operations across multiple vessels simultaneously." "And the problems?" Torres hesitated before answering. "The ethereal species are struggling with the physical demands of prolonged combat operations. Their energy-based physiology doesn't integrate well with the high-stress environment of human tactical systems. Additionally, several species are having psychological difficulties with what they term our predatory approach to warfare." Zexthera understood the concern. Human military doctrine was based on assumptions that most coalition species found disturbing. Where coalition forces preferred defensive strategies and carefully planned operations, humans favored aggressive tactics, acceptable loss ratios, and what they called calculated risks that other species considered reckless endangerment. "Admiral," another voice called from across the command center. General Karath approached, his massive form moving with the careful precision of someone adapting to an environment designed for smaller beings. "We've received updated intelligence from human deep reconnaissance operations." The displays around them shifted to show new tactical data, and Zexthera felt her blood turn cold. The Dark Fleet was moving ahead of schedule. "They begun mobilization operations in the Void Sector," Karath continued, his voice grim. "Human scouts report massive fleet concentrations at 7 staging points. The invasion will begin within 6 weeks, not 6 months." Commander Torres was already activating emergency communication channels. "All command stations, this is Joint Operations. Initiate Scenario 7 mobilization. All fleet units report readiness status immediately." The command center erupted into controlled chaos as dozens of species worked together to coordinate a defense that would determine the fate of their entire civilization. Holographic displays showed ships moving throughout coalition space as vessels that had been completing final modifications were rushed into service regardless of their completion status. "What's our actual readiness level?" Zexthera asked. General Karath consulted his tactical readouts. 73% of planned defensive modifications are complete. 41% of coalition crews have finished integration training with human tactical systems. Material stockpiles are at 68% of projected requirements. In other words, we're not ready, Zexthera said bluntly. No, Admiral Harrison's voice came from behind them as he entered the command center, we're not. But, we're going to fight anyway because the alternative is extinction. Harrison moved to the central tactical display, his presence immediately commanding attention from every being in the room. Over the past 3 months, he had proven himself to be a commander capable of coordinating military operations across dozens of species and hundreds of star systems. More importantly, he had earned the respect of coalition leaders who had initially viewed him with suspicion. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings, he said, addressing the mixed species command staff, we always knew this moment would come. The Dark Fleet has decided they've learned enough about our capabilities. They're moving to crush us before we can complete our preparations. Admiral, Ambassador Thelnara's voice came through the communication system from the diplomatic vessel that remained in the system. What are our actual chances of success? Harrison was quiet for a moment before answering. Honestly? If this were a human-only operation, I'd estimate our chances at approximately 20%. With coalition industrial support and the improvements we've made to your defensive capabilities, I'm upgrading that to 35%. The silence that followed was deafening. Every being in the command center understood they were preparing for a battle they would probably lose. However, Harrison continued, there's something the Dark Fleet doesn't know about human military doctrine. We don't plan for victory through superior force. We plan for victory through superior adaptation. What does that mean? Dr. Goldscale asked from his position at the scientific analysis station. It means we're going to lose every battle until we figure out how to win the war, Harrison replied. Human military history is filled with examples of seemingly hopeless conflicts that we won through learning, adaptation, and sheer bloody-minded refusal to accept defeat. Commander Torres activated a new display showing human historical records. The Dark Fleet has superior numbers, proven technology, and extensive intelligence about our capabilities. But they've never faced an enemy that adapts and evolves during the course of active combat operations. General Korath studied the historical data with growing interest. You're proposing to use early defeats as learning experiences to develop new tactics? Exactly, Harrison confirmed. Every engagement will provide data about their capabilities, weaknesses, and tactical doctrine. We'll lose ships, we'll lose crews, and we'll lose battles. But each loss will make us more effective in the next engagement. That's a remarkably callous approach to warfare, Ambassador Thelnara observed. It's a remarkably effective approach to survival, Harrison replied. The Dark Fleet has conquered dozens of civilizations using the same proven tactics. They expect us to fight using conventional strategies they can predict and counter. Instead, we're going to evolve during the war itself, forcing them to constantly adapt to new threats they can't anticipate. Admiral Zexthera felt a chill of recognition. She was seeing the predatory intelligence that had made humanity dominant on their homeworld applied to interstellar warfare. Where other species planned for specific scenarios, humans planned to become whatever they needed to be to ensure survival. What do you need from us? She asked. Complete tactical flexibility, Harrison replied. We need coalition commanders willing to abandon traditional doctrine when it proves ineffective. We need crews trained to implement new tactics with minimal preparation time. Most importantly, we need political leadership willing to accept initial defeats as the price of eventual victory. The communication channel activated with a priority override from Chancellor Morvek. His mental voice carried across the command center with unmistakable authority. Admiral Harrison, this is Chancellor Morvek. The Coalition Council has reviewed your tactical assessment and reached a decision. You have complete operational authority for the duration of this crisis. All Coalition military assets are now under unified human command. The magnitude of that decision was staggering. For the first time in Coalition history, they had surrendered military command to a non-Coalition species. It represented either the ultimate expression of trust or the desperate action of a civilization facing extinction. Chancellor, Harrison replied, I understand the weight of the responsibility you've placed on me. I will not let your faith be misplaced. See that you don't, Admiral. Our survival depends on it. As the communication ended, Harrison turned to address the mixed species command staff directly. We have 6 weeks to prepare for a war that will determine whether our civilizations survive or become footnotes in Dark Fleet expansion records. Every being in this room represents thousands of years of cultural evolution and millions of individuals who deserve to see tomorrow. Our enemy believes they understand us because they've observed our past behavior. They're about to discover that humanity's greatest strength has always been our ability to become something we've never been before when survival demands it. And, now, thanks to this alliance, that ability extends to every species in the coalition. The command center buzzed with activity as representatives from dozens of species worked together to coordinate humanity's survival. But, Zexthera noticed something that would have been impossible 3 months earlier. Coalition officers were implementing human tactical doctrine with increasing confidence, while human crew members adapted to work alongside beings they had never encountered before the alliance. The galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented, a defensive war fought by species that had learned to fight like humans while retaining their own unique capabilities. Whether that combination would be enough to survive the coming storm remained to be seen. The countdown to invasion had begun, and, with it, the countdown to the ultimate test of everything humanity and the coalition had learned about cooperation, adaptation, and the will to survive against impossible odds. The Dark Fleet arrived in the Kepler 442 system like a plague of locusts descending on fertile fields. Their ships materialized from hyperspace in perfect formation, their black hulls absorbing light and radiating menace. The scope of their fleet defied imagination, over 3,000 vessels ranging from massive dreadnoughts to swarms of smaller attack craft, all moving with the precision of a force that had conquered dozens of civilizations. Admiral Harrison stood in the Joint Command Center, watching the tactical displays with the calm focus of someone who had spent months preparing for this exact moment. Around him, representatives from 47 different species worked together in controlled chaos, coordinating a defense that would determine the fate of their entire galactic civilization. "Contact," Commander Torres announced, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. "Dark Fleet is transmitting on all frequencies. Standard conquest protocols, immediate surrender or complete annihilation. Response?" General Karath asked, his massive form tense with anticipation. Harrison's smile was cold and predatory. "Tell them that humanity doesn't negotiate with extinctionist empires. If they want this system, they can try to take it." The battle began with the Dark Fleet's traditional opening gambit, a massive coordinated assault designed to overwhelm defensive positions through superior firepower and numbers. Their ships moved in perfect synchronization, targeting key defensive installations with weapons that had proven effective against dozens of previous civilizations. They were not prepared for what happened next. The coalition defensive fleet scattered in apparently random directions, abandoning traditional formation fighting for tactics that seemed to defy military logic. Individual ships began operating independently, using human-developed stealth systems to appear and disappear from sensor networks while conducting hit-and-run attacks that targeted specific components of Dark Fleet vessels. Phase 1 is active, Admiral Zexthera reported from her position aboard the upgraded Divine Retribution. All units are implementing adaptive harassment protocols. The Dark Fleet commanders found themselves facing an enemy that refused to fight according to established patterns. Where previous civilizations had attempted to match their formation tactics and firepower, the coalition forces were conducting what could only be described as guerrilla warfare in space. Ships would emerge from stealth, deliver precisely targeted attacks, and vanish again before retaliation was possible. "Dark Fleet is adapting to harassment tactics," Dr. Goldscale reported from the analysis station. "They're deploying counter-stealth measures and attempting to predict our movement patterns." "Expected," Harrison replied calmly. "Torres, initiate Phase 2. The nature of the battle changed again as coalition forces abandoned stealth tactics and shifted to what human military doctrine called swarm fighting. Hundreds of smaller vessels, many of them converted civilian craft equipped with human weapon systems, began attacking in coordinated groups that appeared and disappeared unpredictably throughout the Dark Fleet formation. The Dark Fleet found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to have no consistent tactical doctrine. Every time they adapted to one approach, their opponents shifted to completely different strategies. Ships that had been conducting stealth attacks suddenly appeared in massed formations. Vessels that had been fighting independently suddenly began coordinating complex group maneuvers. "Dark Fleet casualties are mounting," General Karath reported with satisfaction. "Their commanders are struggling to coordinate responses to tactics they've never encountered." But the Dark Fleet's numerical superiority was beginning to tell. Coalition losses were mounting faster than they could be replaced, and even the most advanced human tactical systems couldn't overcome odds of 5 to 1 indefinitely. "Admiral," Commander Torres said quietly, "we're losing approximately 3 ships for every Dark Fleet vessel destroyed. At current rates, we'll be overwhelmed within 8 hours. "Understood," Harrison replied. "All units, this is Joint Command. Initiate Phase 3, Full Human Doctrine Implementation." What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for centuries. Every coalition ship in the battle zone simultaneously abandoned every tactical principle they had ever learned and began fighting like humans. The change was immediately apparent to the Dark Fleet commanders. Ships that had been retreating from superior force suddenly turned to engage in seemingly suicidal attack runs. Vessels that were heavily damaged continued fighting instead of withdrawing for repairs. Most unsettling of all, coalition forces began targeting Dark Fleet ships with what could only be described as calculated fury. "All coalition vessels," Admiral Harrison's voice carried across the battle zone, "you are authorized to engage in acceptable loss operations. Every ship you destroy is worth the loss of your own vessel. Make them pay for every system they want to conquer." The Dark Fleet found themselves facing an enemy that not only refused to retreat but actually became more dangerous as they sustained losses. Coalition crews that lost main weapons switched to ramming attacks. Vessels that lost propulsion used their remaining power to serve as stationary gun platforms. Ships that were critically damaged deliberately rammed Dark Fleet vessels in carefully calculated collisions designed to cause maximum enemy casualties. "This is impossible," the lead Dark Fleet commander transmitted to his subordinates, his message intercepted by coalition intelligence systems. "No species fights like this. They should have surrendered hours ago." "Commander," Admiral Harrison transmitted back on the same frequency, "you've never fought humans before. We don't surrender. We adapt, we evolve, and we win through sheer bloody-minded refusal to accept defeat." The psychological impact on the Dark Fleet was becoming apparent. They had conquered dozens of civilizations using proven tactics against enemies who fought according to predictable patterns. Now they faced an opponent that seemed to become more effective as the battle progressed, learning from each engagement and implementing new tactics faster than they could develop countermeasures. "Admiral," Ambassador Thelnara's voice came through the communication system from the diplomatic vessel that had remained safely behind the battle lines, "the Ethereal High Council is reporting something unprecedented. The Dark Fleet's quantum communication networks are showing signs of confusion." "Explain," Harrison demanded while simultaneously coordinating attack patterns across 17 different fleet groups. "Their command structure appears to be experiencing what we might call psychological breakdown. They've never encountered sustained resistance this effective. Their military doctrine doesn't include provisions for enemies that refuse to be defeated." Dr. Goldscale looked up from his analysis station with excitement. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy buildups in the Dark Fleet's larger vessels. It appears they're preparing to withdraw from the system." The revelation sent a ripple of shock through the command center. The Dark Fleet had never retreated from any engagement in their recorded history. They conquered completely or died in the attempt. "All units," Harrison broadcast, "the enemy is preparing to disengage. Do not let them withdraw intact. Every ship that escapes will return with knowledge of our capabilities." The final phase of the battle became a running fight as coalition forces pursued retreating Dark Fleet vessels with the kind of relentless aggression that had made humanity the apex predator species on their homeworld. Ships that had been conducting defensive operations suddenly became hunters, tracking down fleeing enemies with methodical efficiency. "Dark Fleet is experiencing cascading command failures," Torres reported with barely controlled excitement. "Multiple ship groups are surrendering rather than face continued engagement." Surrendering. The word hit the command center like a physical blow. The Dark Fleet, conquerors of dozens of civilizations, were surrendering to an enemy they had expected to defeat in hours. When the battle finally ended, the tactical display showed a result that defied every projection and expectation. The Dark Fleet had lost over 2,000 vessels, with another 600 surrendering to coalition forces. Coalition losses, while significant, were far lower than anyone had dared hope. But, more important than the tactical victory was the psychological impact. Across the galaxy, other Dark Fleet formations received reports of their first major defeat in recorded history. The news that a mere coalition of primitive species, aided by unknown allies, had not only survived their assault but actually defeated them sent ripples of shock through their entire command structure. Admiral Harrison, Chancellor Morveck's mental voice carried across the command center from the coalition capital. The Galaxy Council has reached a unanimous decision. Humanity is hereby granted full membership in the Galactic Coalition, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. Furthermore, the Chancellor continued, we are establishing the Harrison Doctrine as standard coalition military strategy. Any species that threatens the sovereignty of coalition member worlds will face the combined might of civilizations that have learned to fight like humans. Admiral Harrison stood quietly for a moment, surrounded by beings from dozens of different worlds who had learned to trust human leadership in the face of extinction. Chancellor, on behalf of humanity and the United Earth System, we accept membership in the coalition. But, more importantly, we accept the responsibility to help defend every species that chooses cooperation over conquest. As the command center erupted in celebration, Admiral Zexthera approached Harrison with an expression of profound respect. Admiral, I have served in the coalition military for 4 centuries. I have never seen anything like what happened here today. What you saw, Admiral, was what happens when different species learn from each other instead of trying to destroy each other. The Dark Fleet lost because they could only conceive of warfare as conquest. We won because we redefined warfare as survival through adaptation. Dr. Goldscale, studying the final battle reports, looked up with wonder. The implications of this victory extend far beyond military considerations. We've proven that cooperation between different evolutionary paths can create capabilities that exceed the sum of individual contributions. More than that, Ambassador Thelnara added, we've demonstrated that predatory aggression and defensive cooperation aren't mutually exclusive. We've learned to be peaceful when possible and ruthlessly effective when necessary. Commander Torres was reviewing preliminary reports from across coalition space. Admiral, we're receiving communications from dozens of uncontacted civilizations. Word of the Dark Fleet's defeat is spreading throughout the galaxy. Species that have been hiding from them for centuries are requesting diplomatic contact. The scope of what they had accomplished was beginning to become clear. The victory at Kepler 442 hadn't just saved the coalition from conquest. It had broken the Dark Fleet's psychological dominance over the entire galactic community. For the first time in centuries, peaceful civilizations had an example of successful resistance to extinctionist empires. What's next? General Karath asked, his massive form relaxed for the first time since the crisis began. Harrison studied the tactical displays showing the aftermath of the battle, then shifted his attention to star charts showing the vast regions of space still under Dark Fleet control. Now we finish what we started. There are dozens of civilizations still under Dark Fleet occupation, and probably hundreds more hiding in remote systems, afraid to reveal themselves. We're going to hunt down every Dark Fleet stronghold, liberate every occupied world, and establish a galactic community where cooperation is stronger than conquest. We're going to make sure that what happened here becomes the standard response to any species that thinks extinction is an acceptable tool of expansion. As the Joint Command Center continued coordinating rescue operations and beginning the complex process of integrating Dark Fleet prisoners into coalition society, Admiral Harrison reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. Humanity had hidden in the shadows for 2 centuries, learning and preparing for a war they hoped would never come. When it finally arrived, they had emerged not as conquerors, but as allies willing to share everything they had learned about survival. The galaxy had indeed been stunned when a human warship made first contact. But what would reshape galactic civilization wasn't humanity's technological capabilities or military prowess. It was their willingness to teach other species how to fight like humans while retaining their own unique strengths and values. The age of Dark Fleet dominance was over. The age of cooperative galactic civilization was just beginning, and at its heart was a simple human principle that had proven more powerful than any weapon: the idea that differences in evolution, culture, and biology weren't obstacles to overcome, but strengths to combine in the face of any threat that dared challenge the fundamental right of all species to exist and thrive among the stars.